What is up, y'all? We are here for our Secret Teachings of Jesus. It is well after midnight on Saturday. This is our secret midnight sermon. So a while back, I was really interested in reading the Gnostic Gospels, and I didn't know when I'd have time to do it, so I thought I'd make it a weekly segment with us. And so we have been delving into the Nag Hammadi scriptures. There is a playlist on my channel, Secret Teachings of Jesus, if you're interested in some of the other segments. And let's see, we're in the Gospel of Philip now. The book that we covered before this was the Secret Book of James. James as in Jesus's brother. And I'll have to say, I've really enjoyed these a lot, even though I'm usually coming in after work and I'm tired and it's difficult, and these are thick and heavy, and it's a lot of energy coming through. But I feel like it's always so fulfilling on the other side of it. So I'm always glad that I'm here and we do this even when I'm tired. Okay, so this week's portion, you know what? I should mention that in Kabbalah, we learn that whenever you practice restriction, in this case, restriction would be when you push through the comfort zone, when you break the flesh in the spirit of Eucharist, in sacrifice, for the sake of sharing, for the sake of not receiving the comforts of the flesh or receiving instant gratification, but you restrict that body consciousness and you do it anyway, it reveals even more light. So in layman's terms, that means that when for instance, making this video, doing this act of sharing the light with others, it's difficult right now and I'm tired, but the harder it is, it's like the more light will be revealed. If you're a person who it's easy to give money because you have plenty to give, but it's harder for you to go help someone move, or if someone's ill, go take them a pot of soup or something, then that is the thing that's harder for you to do will actually make the biggest difference. It'll make the biggest blessing. The people who have overcome the most difficult things for them, say for instance, an addict who has somehow found a way to recover and rebuild, that reveals even more light than just say a person who's always just been doing good and doing the right thing and never really having those kinds of struggles. That's kind of the message, the hopeful message. That's the good news. It's not our perfection that makes us worthy. It's our imperfections that reveal the most light. That's gives us the whole ticket for a physical reality. So in the spirit of Rosh Hashanah and the deep self-reflection and rigorous self-analysis that we've all been under, it hasn't been for shame or guilt or wrongness. It's actually been to embrace that part of ourselves and integrate that and heal it so that we can reveal more light in this world, and so that we can have a more fulfilling life and be open to more blessing, and we're not struggling in the same difficult lessons. It's more about our liberation from bondage than it is feeling guilty or wrong. Okay, so tonight's tonight's portion from the Gospel of Philip is called The Lamb. And I thought that this was very timely for this time of year. I think that the last few weeks we've chosen good portions that were synchronistically in alignment. And for those of you who are new to this kind of weekly segment of the Gnostics, I'm not a theologian. I just I'm really interested. And so before I come on camera, when I come in from work, I open the book up, I find a passage that stands out, and then I start getting downloads. And then so that's when I just start recording, and then we read the passage together, and then I'll unpack it and I'll give you what's coming through. Okay, so tonight's portion is the lamb. Do not despise the lamb, for without it no one could see the king. Now in the footnotes, well, let's just read this again. We'll go a little slower. Do not despise the lamb, for without it no one could see the king. So in the footnotes, king can also be or the door. So let's read it that way. Do not despise the lamb, for without it no one could see the door. So what is the lamb? The lamb is always the sacrifice. That's usually the way it's depicted. That's the way this initially comes up to me. It's like, don't despise the sacrifice, because that is what's going to allow you to open up to a greater consciousness, a greater awareness of the king, of source, of the light, of Christ consciousness, right? Of enlightenment. That's how you see it all. That's how you witness that awe of God, that fear of God. And the fear of God is not fear that you'll be struck down or punished, but it's the awe of the reverence of the sacred, of the holy, that God is in all things. So it's like, don't despise the sacrifice that you have to make in order to actually reveal more light, because the light is going to reveal more fulfillment for you. But without that sacrifice, we're not able to see the light. Because like, how many times in life is everything going perfectly well and you're getting everything you want, but also you have like a deep desire to grow and change and a proactive like yearning to search out the weaker parts of yourself? It's not usually those times. It's usually the times when we have lost something dear to us, or when we are extremely fearful that we will lose something dear to us, that we pay attention and we want to actually change and evolve and grow. And so what's even more powerful than that is if there is something that we know we need to give up that's hard, we go ahead and give it up anyway proactively, because we know that by doing that, or by putting ourselves out when we know we have like this deep gut instinct that we should. And this takes discernment too, because like you have to know that like it's like a divine inkling that you need to do it, like divine guidance. Because if you get overly involved in someone else's process, there can be many layers involved here that can trip things up. For one, if you're overgiving to someone, that can prevent them from pushing through to their next level. It can create a phenomenon known as bread of shame, where when you give to someone who hasn't earned and hasn't like gone through a process of earning to receive that light, then it creates resentment and shame. And so as we proactively go after making sacrifices, it's extra powerful, because it's not just happening to us and we're just like reacting to whatever life is bringing and then we learn from it. It's coming from a desire, like a proactive desire, where you're seeking out affinity with the light when you make a sacrifice, when you put yourself out of your comfort zone, when you do something that's hard for you for the sake of someone else. So, what we were saying is that it's not the same as just overgiving to someone out of because you're a doormat, or because you are codependent, or because you are enmeshed, or I'm including myself in this. It's not the same as people pleasing, where you try to go out of your way to bend over backwards to people please everyone and overnourish everybody around you and overgive and over deplete and extend yourself. That's not the same thing. In fact, sometimes we can get in the way of other people's evolution in doing that. Or sometimes we can have like an ulterior motive, because it's like, why are you people pleasing? Are you trying to take light in that situation? Are you trying to take energy and get validation, or like confirm or affirm your value because of, only what you're giving to a situation? Or is it a transactional kind of giving where you expect something in return, even if it's just someone's admiration or gratitude, right? So a sacrifice is different when it's a voluntary act. It's not something that's taken from you. So when we do that, it opens us up to a new level of depth, a new level of affinity with the light, affinity of understanding, and it transmutes and changes you on a level that is sustaining and creates like an enduring good. You don't slide back. I feel like I learned in Kabbalah that like when you elevate the soul, like once the soul is elevated, like it doesn't go backwards after that. Like, you might stagnate for a minute, but it's like you don't go backwards. Like you keep the light that you've earned. So yeah, it's like, don't resent the sacrifices that you have to make, because that is what actually opens you up to a greater level of fulfillment, a greater level of understanding of life, a greater sense of beauty and appreciation for it all. It's funny, the more that we invest in something, the more we care about it. Whether that's a business or a person or a pet or whatever, or our creator. Whenever we invest, we care about that thing, we value it. And so when the sacrifice was asked for back in the day, when they were making like blood sacrifices in the Old Testament, it wasn't just any old animal that would do. It had to be the best, the most pristine. It had to be the hardest thing to give up. It wasn't just the scraps or the throwaway or the surplus or the afterthought. It was the most prized, the most precious, the most perfected vessel to give up, because that is the energy that you're going to open up and release by slaughtering that animal. So energy can't be created or destroyed. And so when you are making that sacrifice, that life force, that light is leaving that thing and going into something else. And so that's another reason why you would want the most elevated version of that light. You don't want the scraps, right? And so God does not want those scraps either. And we shouldn't either. And so it's so funny that like this time of year during, this period of Virgo where we do this deep self-analysis, we're getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, for this judgment day. And it's like we're making sacrifices throughout this month of Virgo leading up to this, to prepare ourselves for this judgment day where we receive judgment and then we receive purification and we receive the light of the blessings of the year to come. And so part of this like 30-day period requires us to search deep within and look at our ego, look at our negativity, look at the parts of ourselves that we really want to change. that we really don't want to bring forward into our next year, that we want to up level from, that the parts of our soul that we're ready to transcend and heal and correct and balance and we're ready to move forward. And so we're having to overcome the parts of ourselves that are the most comfortable or our blind spots. And it's very uncomfortable. It's very difficult. These are hard sacrifices to make because the ego, it loves its satisfaction, you know? And so we're having to deny that ego and sacrifice our pride or our fear or our weakness or our temptations. We're having to put them on the chopping block, and it's not easy. And we may be asked to let go of what the ego holds most dear. And it's difficult. And it makes you want to be bitter and angry with God. And if you think, oh, I've never been bitter and angry at God, who would do that? It's like, think back. Have you ever lost someone to death? You know, have you ever had like an extreme situation that was so fucked up or tragic that you were just like, you were cursing God and you hated God? I mean, plenty of people do. But so many times we don't even realize that, like, we resent, you know, God for the things that happen. And so even in the micro things in our lives, like, oh God, I don't want to have to do this, or I don't want to have to admit this, or I don't want to have to see this. Those are sometimes the things that we have to look at that are holding us back. And the ego is holding it most precious. And sometimes it's the things that we love the most that are the worst for us, that are toxic for us, that are the hardest to let go of, that we have to. And those are the lambs we want to despise. Oh, I hate you for this. I hate you for making me do this kind of thing. Oh, I hate that I have to give this up kind of thing. Don't despise the lamb, because that sacrifice is what is revealing the most light in you. That is what's giving you the most affinity with the light of the Creator. And it's going to give you a closer, intimate relationship with the Creator. Even just from the feeling of being able to sense that the Creator has come and gone through a situation. There's a verse in the Old Testament, and it's something to the effect of, you will know me by my hind parts. And it's, the gist of it is basically like, when God is in a situation, it's usually so crazy, the situation that's going on, that you don't even realize that God was in it until it's just passed. You can't even see it except for by hindsight or upon reflection. And that's usually how it is for us, because the truth is that God is within every situation. God permeates every atom of the being of our existence. So to think that God who is omnipresent, is not anywhere would be foolish and stupid. God is everywhere. And so God can be revealed in anything. And it usually requires that sacrifice. But yeah, it's like when you see like that whole, like, you will know me by my hind parts. And it's like, you don't realize that God has just been there until like he just left. And it's like, sometimes it takes years after the fact, when you're reflecting on something, that you have a revelation about it or an epiphany. And you're like, oh yeah, wow. God was in that situation. I was either protected, or I was being shown something, or I was going through something that I was keeping myself in, that like those circumstances were trying to push me out and I just couldn't see it, kind of thing, you know? But yeah. Do not despise the lamb for without it, no one can see the King. And even just understanding the King, or becoming more aware of the abstractness that we will never understand, which is the King, it takes sacrifice. It takes work. It takes effort. And sometimes we dread that, right? I know, like, for instance, I don't really dread my morning routine of prayer and things like that, study. It comforts me and it helps me get into my day. But this moment, sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to get into bed. I want to take a shower. I want to eat. And I just want to relax. I want to rest. And tonight it was really like I felt my ego despising this lamb. It was like, you've been a little under the weather. You need to sleep. You need to go to bed. You need to eat something. It would be good for you. You need to like watch out for your health too. Like, there was a Sabbath on the 7th day he rested. But like, I can't do that because I know that like the harder these teachings of Jesus videos are, the ones that I'm like so tired, it's like that might be the one that like somebody needs to hear and needs to watch. So whatever you're going through, it's hard to hear this in the moment of pain and anguish. And I know it's so obnoxious to hear. But I have been there again and again and again and again and again. I've heard that other people say it again and again and again and again. And I'm here to tell the tale again and again and again that the sacrifice that you're going through now, like if you embrace it, it can do miracles. Miracles can happen. On the other side of a difficult situation, you can find the light in it. Like on the other side of the healing, you will reflect back and you will see ways that you have grown stronger, ways that you have grown deeper and more understanding and more compassionate and more wiser. And maybe you built grit and skill, and maybe it's going to give you know-how to do something else. Maybe it's going to give you something that you can share with someone else. Who knows? But there is a reason. And whatever it is, it can reveal more of the light of the Creator, more of the mystery of the universe to you. The Lamb. Do not despise the Lamb, for without it, no one could see the King. And I mean, I guess like the most obvious, like high concept here is that like the Lamb is Jesus. It's Christ. It's like, don't despise the Lamb. Without it, you can't meet the King. And it's not like saying like, don't hate Jesus. Don't be hating on Jesus. But like the Christ consciousness, the path of Christ consciousness, the discipleship of that is not easy. It is nothing but sacrifice. The whole process of Christ consciousness is sacrificing every layer of the ego, overcoming those 7 powers. It's about self-emptying, the emptying of the small self to align with the higher self, the perfected self. And in that is where the kingdom of heaven is inherited from within. But yeah, do not despise that path, because it's actually going to align you with the ultimate fulfillment. I remember growing up, and like even through, my early adulthood, the thought of being obedient to God, having God control my life, it was triggering. It was revolting. I was repelled. I was defiant of like the idea that I just didn't have any choices. And then I started to understand it because I always loved God too. I always loved like thinking about all of the cosmology and everything. And I've always been one to pray and whatnot. But yeah, it was, I had this notion that if God were to control my life, I was going to be miserable and it wasn't going to be anything that I liked. And now, as a mystic, probably considered wayward by most, I would love it if God had complete control over my life. That'd be great, because I'm confident that I would be in my ultimate fulfillment, my ultimate potential. I would be living in my purpose. I would be using my talents and like having like this benefit of like helping others, and everything would flow so well. And, you know, there would be no suffering, and there'd be so much abundance, and just like everything would be like in such balance and perfection and harmony and vitality and fertility. And that's just not how it works, because we have free will and God does not control our life. In fact, we have to choose the path, and we have to trust that that's going to be fulfilling, that we can trust God with that. And I'm pretty confident that it actually is the most fulfilling route. And I would love if I could just be roboted there. But it takes free will. And unfortunately, we trip ourselves up a lot. So yes, therein lies the difficulty. All right, you guys. So yeah, don't despise the lamb, the sacrifice. What seems like the harder route actually leads you to the easier, more fulfilling route in the end. It's usually when you pick what's going to seem like the easiest superficial route that leads you to the hardship and the misery and the suffering in the end. Oh, that's the way of it. The lamb. Do not despise the lamb, for without it, no one could see the king. All right, y'all, we're getting in under a cool 28 minutes. We're at 27 minutes, definitely far from the 45 we're usually at. So thank goodness. Thank God in heaven. Well, I am now going to enjoy dinner and a hot shower in bed. All right, y'all, I hope you've had a good evening. Ciao.